This time, I'm going to be talking about Shazam 2 Fury of the Gods. That's right. So before I get into this movie review, I do want to give my thoughts on what I thought of the first one. And overall, I thought the first Shazam movie was a really fun superhero movie. I absolutely loved Billy. I almost said Billy Cranston. I meant to say Billy Batson as the main character. Although you can't blame me for accidentally giving him a Power Ranger name, because let's face it, this Shazam movie has so many parallels to Power Rangers. It's hilarious. From a villainous witch that has a magical staff, and then taking down a bunch of teenagers with attitude that transform into color-coded superheroes. Come on, the Power Ranger parallels are there. Joking aside though, I was a real big fan of the first movie. I thought that it had a lot of heart, a lot of great comedy, and one of my worries going into this one was that the comedy was going to be there, but the heart was going to be missing. Thankfully, that is not the case. It keeps both the heart and the comedy from the first movie. While I don't think it's as well structured as the first movie was, there is definitely a lot of effort put into this movie, and I gotta give it credit where credit is due. So first, I gotta talk about what really worked very well about this movie, and I think the main thing they got right was Billy's arc. This is a perfect continuation from where he left off in the previous movie, whereas in the previous movie he kind of struggles to accept his new family. This movie is all about him trying to learn to accept that things are going to change, and sooner or later his family is not going to be necessarily gone, but they are going to be going their own separate ways, living their own lives, and that's something that's really hard for him to accept, because most of his childhood he never actually had a real family, and now that he finally does get that stability that he never got to have as a kid, he barely really gets to enjoy it that much until he's almost 18, and then suddenly things are all of a sudden changing. I think this is a perfect arc to continue that storyline, and the way they execute it I thought was, for the most part, really well done. The nitpick I have with this, however, looking into the first Shazam movie, one thing that always impressed me a lot was Zachary Levi and sorry, I forgot the kid's name, Asher Angel, feeling very in sync with each other. Whenever Billy Batson would transform into Shazam, he always felt like the same person. They never felt like two different characters. I can't say the same for the sequel though. I feel like the actors aren't quite as well in sync with each other, and therefore they don't often feel like you're watching like the same person. And I could mostly accept this in the idea that maybe he purposely acts different whenever he's Shazam, because he has to be like the leader of the team, so he has to have a very different mindset. But there are times where we see him by himself as Shazam, and even then those mannerisms that he plays as Shazam is a lot different than what he plays when he's just regular Billy Batson. So I feel like the two actors just weren't quite as in sync with each other. The other main character in this movie, because I feel like this movie really focuses on Billy and Freddy the most. When it comes to the other kids in this movie, I'll get to that later, but as far as it goes with them, not too much of a story around any of them individually. Really, they're kind of just there to move the plot forward, and I think that's probably one of my bigger complaints about this movie, but I'll get a little more into that later on. I do want to talk about Freddy because I thought his arc was also really well done, as now he's gotten used to having these powers. We can see that Freddy doesn't like who he is as a person when he's not in his superhero form. When he's just himself, he feels like less of a man, and he also just doesn't feel like he's worthy of, he doesn't feel as much like a hero when he's just Freddy. So I think like his arc of having to learn that while when he's transformed into Shazam, that may be what gives him his powers. The heroic side of him really comes from his heart, which he doesn't need the powers to have. And I think that the way they tell it in that movie was quite beautifully done. And not gonna lie, there was one scene in particular, like towards the end, that I actually got a little emotional watching. It was very cliche and cheesy, but I think because of the way it was built up, I think it was very well done. And I do like this representation too. I mean, Freddy having a disability, I think, is something that more kids out there would really love to see, especially kids going through similar struggles. So I hope this is something we can see more of in future superhero movies going forward. When it comes to the villains, I think the villains are very well done. They are, they have a very understandable motive. It's not the most compelling or complex backstory, but you can definitely see where they're coming from. You can see where their frustration comes from. And I also do love kind of the parallel between them and the foster kids, because, within the foster kids, you have the fact that none of them are actually related, and yet they act so much like a coordinated family together. And yet you have the sisters that are related, and yet they can't stop fighting amongst themselves. And I thought that was kind of a perfect parallel between the two. Let's see. So going back to the foster kids, I do feel like, my biggest issue was that, they had plenty of, not too much screen time, but they did have enough to where I feel like if they wanted to, they really could have fit in like at least a very small arc for all of them. However, rather than really giving them an arc, they're given things to do, and those things do help move the plot forward, but it doesn't really tell us too much about them as characters. There is one scene that actually did get a lot of people in my theater in particular, like kind of going, aw, with one of the kids. I won't like spoil what it is, but I'll say that they did that. However, I didn't think there was really anything to build up to it. It just kind of like came out of nowhere, and it was just kind of like, okay, that's a cool moment, but I didn't think there was really anything to build up to it. So I think that, like, I'm not saying like all of them had to have had like a complete arc like Billy and Freddy. I just wish they had a little bit more with them, and that they weren't just used to move the plot forward. I wish they were given just a little bit more. And I get it, when you have a giant cast like that, it's really hard, especially because when you think about it, it's a total of 11 actors playing, amongst the 6 different characters. You technically have 6 characters being played by 11 actors, because only one of the kid characters is actually like played by the same actor when they transform it to Shazam. So I get how it would have been really hard to give all of them a complete arc, but I feel like they could have given them at least a little bit more, is all I'm saying. So there's that. And I will say the other kind of complaint that I do have about this movie is that when it comes to the overall plot, not necessarily the story, but definitely when it comes to the plot, it gets a bit bit convoluted at the end, and not in a bad way. However, because of them having to give all the characters something to do, I do feel like the plot takes a few too many shortcuts, especially towards the end, where a lot of things just really happen because the plot demands it to happen. Things work out because the plot demands it to work out. There's even a product placement that plays into it, and while it got a laugh out of me, don't get me wrong, it was just so incredibly dumb, and it just, again, one of those jokes that just, to me anyways, kind of came out of nowhere, and it didn't take me out of the movie, but it definitely didn't add anything to it, if that makes sense. So overall, guys, those are my main thoughts that I can give you in the most non-spoilery ways as possible. If I do end up doing a spoiler review with this movie, hopefully I'll be able to do it with Adam or Indy in order to talk more specifically about the things that didn't quite work, and specifically the things that I thought worked very well. But that's my vague overall, my overall thoughts on the movie. Like, I really did enjoy it overall, not quite as much as the first movie, but I did think it was a very solid film overall. So I would definitely give this movie a B, and I definitely recommend checking it out. Now, there are 2 things I want to talk about. I wanted to talk about it after the overall review was done, because I have some questions here, but these are spoiler questions. So if you guys do not want to be spoiled, definitely exit out of the video right now, because I'm going to go into some spoilers right here. Hopefully, if I remember to add some spoiler tags on here, I'll do that in post-production, but here it is. Spoiler number 1, my biggest question is, Jamil from Peacemaker is in this movie. I mean, it may not be him. It may just be the same actor playing a different character, but his mannerisms seem very similar, so I'm kind of led to believe he's the same character, and they kill him off in this movie. So I'm kind of wondering if that's going to play out in Peacemaker Season 2, if that's going to get brought up, or if maybe after the Flash movie, the universe gets reset and that doesn't get brought up. Question number 2. And I bring this up because this seems to contradict some of the things that James Gunn has been saying. it just makes me have more questions about what the new DC universe is going to be going forward is all. So this movie has 2 post-credit scenes. Second post-credit scene was pretty funny. I really enjoyed it. First post-credit scene though. Okay, so the first post-credit scene is essentially we have I totally forgot his name. Economos. Yeah, that's right. We have Economos along with the blonde woman from Peacemaker. Dear God, I am terrible at remembering names and I really apologize. But regardless, we have 2 characters from Peacemaker and they are there to recruit Shazam to join the Justice Society of America. And what I find just really bizarre about this is that this seems to continue that storyline that was originally brought up in Black Adam, where in the DCEU, it appears that Argus is apparently they're apparently the ones that are funding the Justice Society of America. The JSA seem to apparently work with Argus or work for Argus. It's kind of like hard to tell. Basically, the JSA seems to be very government, based, whereas like in the comic books, they were more independently run. So very much seems to be different, and they seem to be continuing that going forward in Shazam. And the weird thing, or the thing that I personally find weird about this, is that James Gunn had said that moving forward, Black Adam won't be in the DCEU going forward. That'll be one of the characters that gets erased. So I do have to say it is a bit weird for them to have kind of a mini connection between the 2 movies, only for, moving forward, one of those movies to be erased. To me, if I was James Gunn, if I was the one, because now, yes, I know this was all done before James Gunn was in charge of DC. However, he did get final say in some of the cuts before they got released in theaters. So I do wonder why James Gunn decided to keep this, post-credit scene in. Second post-credit scene totally makes a lot of sense, as it is kind of a continuation of the first post-credit scene. But for that second post-credits, or for that first post-credit scene though, I'm kind of confused on why they kept it in there, if I'm being honest. Now, again, I could be wrong. Maybe going forward, they may end up deciding that even Shazam is now no longer part of the new DC universe. But as of now, this just gives me more questions than answers as to what we can expect in the DC universe going forward. But yeah, guys, overall, that was my review of the movie. Enjoyed it, had a great time. I definitely recommend it. If you liked the first one, please give this movie a chance. Don't listen to the reviews out there. I find it really bizarre how low they've been so far, because I thought this was a pretty solid film. B rating, definitely check it out. But of course, guys, at the end of the day, those are just my A+ opinions. We here at A+ Opinions always want to know what you guys think, so definitely let me know your thoughts about this movie in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, but of course, guys, above all, don't forget to keep it A+, and I will talk to you all later. Goodbye.